out of the fight.
Anyone else think we could use some mercs? That gives me an idea. Good idea.
How about we capture this mercenary camp?
I carved my own
Slain. Killing spree.
Hearthstone break.
Man alive!
I carved my own path.
Slain.
I carved.
Double kill.
You're done.
Triple kill.
How about we capture this mercenary camp?
Sindora.
Slain.
Oh dear, here come the Zerg. Fewer than the enemies, or whatever that's worth.
I am the blade in the dark.
Enemy hero terminated.
Hearthstone break. Don't make it so easy.
Mayhem.
I am the blade in the dark.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Paul, and in this Red Game to the Con video, we're going to be discussing Intel and AMD. Now, just a few short days ago, you might recall that I put out a video saying that Intel weren't really that concerned with Ryzen. They believe that Kaby Lake and their successive processors are going to be enough to beat back the Ryzen threat, and they told this to investors. However, during that very video, I was like, okay, I can understand that obviously they have to appear fairly confident to investors and, well, the market as a whole, but I did have some concerns. Now, really it comes down, I'll get to the reasons briefly, but, you know, it really comes down to the IPC gains that AMD managed to achieve, which supposedly is at least 40%. I'm actually hearing numbers up to about 53% over their previous generation, which is pretty impressive. Plus clock speed and, of course, overclockability and pricing. Those three things are going to be critical. But Intel supposedly were not worried, at least that's what they were saying publicly. Now, I would hasten to add that this is not official. This is obviously a rumour, but Canard PC has sources who have said that Intel are freaking out about Ryzen. And basically, from what the murmurs are, it's that they were taking them fairly lightly. He believes that the CEO of Intel, who is Brian Krenich, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, has basically given AMD the opportunity to move forward. Now, we all know that the PC market, and by PC market I refer to the traditional desktop market, is shrinking. No one whatsoever can deny that, and there are multiple reasons that this is happening. It's the advent of tablets. Like, for example, let's say all you're doing is browsing the internet, maybe answering your email, maybe going to YouTube and checking out this channel, of course, that type of thing. Then realistically, you don't need a high-end desktop, especially if you're not necessarily a PC gamer. But the key phrase there is PC gaming and anything power related. Power users now are massive, and we're not just talking about video editing, audio editing, programming, development, graphics. Everything now is becoming increasingly reliant on high-end processors. But gaming, PC gaming, is swelling hugely. And we all know that the actual market, the breakdown of the expenditure for different segments. So basically, there was, just a while back actually, Amy on the channel covered this, John Petty Research. This was, I think, a couple of days ago, like late January, let's say January 27th, stuff like that, January 28th. And they released a breakdown of the expenditure of the PC market. Now you might say to yourself, well gee whiz, most people are going to be going for the RX 460s, they're going to be going for the GTX 1050s, they're going to be going for like the i3s, that type of processor, right? Well, not so much. We're talking about the actual pricing and the actual revenue generated. It's at the high end. So basically, the breakdown is the high end is accounting for 43% of the profit, which is ridiculous. Now, obviously, that in turn is going to be something that AMD have really focused in on. And we've all discussed multiple times now about that, you know, Ryzen is going to be released in March. Ryzen is going to have these amount of SKUs, which I'm still not 100% sure. I believe the rumours that we're hearing about the X1800 Pro and all this bollocks. I know it sounds really weird. And another thing, by the way, I forgot to mention in that video, is it sounds an awful lot like one of the older graphics cards generations, the ones that were released like after the X800. I can't remember what the architecture's name is, so you'll have to forgive me. I really can't be bothered to Google it. But anyway, yeah, I'm going to be lazy on that one. I'm just going to admit. So anyway, basically, the issue I have is like Intel know that PC gaming is becoming a bigger deal, right? So i5 processors, i7 processors, without doubt, in general terms, are enough. But the problem is, once you start getting power users involved, especially with DirectX 12, a lot of folks, at least in my opinion, obviously I'm not speaking for you, you might disagree, feel free, let me know in the comments, but at least in my opinion, let's assume that Ryzen clocks, we're going to be talking about the so-called Black Edition here for the high end, which is supposedly, and I know I keep using that word, between the $500 mark for an 8-core processor, whereas the slightly lower end one is, once again, supposedly about $350. Well, let's assume you go for the 3.6 GHz, slightly lower end than the Black Edition 8-core, 16 threads, and let's say it overclocks to, I don't know what the numbers are going to be, I'm just going to pull one out of my ass and say 4.3 GHz, right? So, okay, you're running on average, maybe 500 megahertz, 600 megahertz slower than Kaby Lake. Obviously, Silicon Lottery comes into play. The issue is 600 megahertz, but you're getting an additional 8 threads or 4 processor cores. That's kind of difficult to argue against, especially when Kaby Lake hasn't actually increased IPC. And yes, I know there are a couple of exceptions, which is primarily video encoding, thanks to a few changes they made on the architecture level. But in gaming, there's no real difference. You're going to get, you know, exactly the same frame rate, ostensibly, across different games. So, assuming you're running the same clock speed, otherwise it's all clock speed based. So it's very difficult for me as a, I hate to use the word, but journalist slash reviewer slash whatever, to say to people, gee, you know, if these processors are the same price, Intel is the better buy. It's just, admittedly, it's going to come down a lot to your usage scenarios, but, you know, assuming AMD are competitive with their architecture, and that is a big assuming, because ultimately I've not played it. All we can go on is A, the leaks that we've seen multiple times, and B, their official demonstrations. I'm not ready to 100% jump into Ryzen until I test the damn thing. because that would just be dishonest of me as an individual, and also, to be honest, negligent. I prefer to actually test hardware, and then I'll say, yes, it's great. I personally believe the hype is very exciting. I believe that it certainly has the potential, but potential means diddly crap. You know, it actually performs like that in reality. But if it does perform how it's advertising, I believe it will, because otherwise it's not going to be good for AMD, so that's why I'm pretty sure it is going to perform as advertised. It's going to be very, very weird for Intel in terms of marketing. Okay, so Kaby Lake's out now. And in the future, you've got Coffee Lake, which is when they start moving to a 6-core mainstream processor, assuming that they might be able to do small IPC gains. Then it's going to be a bit weird. I've heard there are some folks and some leaks who are saying that Coffee Lake is not going to be on a 10nm process. It's going to still be on 14nm because Intel are a bit concerned about yields, about shifting down to not only miniaturizing the cores, but also adding in those additional cores to the same so a 10nm process. I don't know if that's going to happen. It's, well, up in the air. But all we know is that, you know, Kaby Lake and its successors are going to appear like 2017 late / early 2018, which is an awful lot of time for Kaby Lake as a whole to be fighting off. Now, obviously, you do have the you know, the upper echelons, but the enthusiast processors from Intel cost so much cash. You know, it's like, just for example, Broadwell E was bloody expensive when it's released, and it's the same for everything. You know, like X99 when it came out, it was just prohibitively expensive, and you've got the cost of the memory, additional memory and everything else, and the motherboards cost an absolute bomb. I'm not saying that they're not impressive processors by any stretch of the imagination, but they're also that much more expensive than what we believe Ryzen is going to be. Now, is that saying that these rumours of Intel really freaking out are true? No, I would always take this stuff with a pinch of salt until, you know, the guy's fired, or, you know, they make, obviously, if Intel, and that's the other thing, we don't know how much actually profit and how much room they have to maneuver. Intel at the moment are enjoying quite a nice market dominance, but things are obviously going to change, you know, over a successive couple of years. And we do know that Intel are actually starting to broaden out as well. Like just yesterday I discussed the Lake Crest chips, which are basically co-processors to their server-orientated things, and these are mostly for like deep learning and stuff like that. But it's obvious that this is a direct response to them really wanting to get into that segment of the market. Not that I blame them, because it's, well, lucrative, but it does show that Intel are kind of thinking about what what Nvidia, what AMD are planning as well. Anyway, so this has been a lot longer than I anticipated, as it tends to be with me. So I'm going to leave you all to it, but let me know what you think. Like, do you think Intel are going to care? I personally believe they do, but obviously the public face is going to be a bit different. Lastly, as always, definitely wait for benchmarks before you put down your money on anything. I don't think anyone should pre-order a damn thing until we've got results. But with all of that said, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. Normal stuff, like, share, comment, subscribe, give me internet cookies, I will greatly appreciate them. And I'll see you soon. Bye for now.
Excellent!
So what's going to happen to CPU prices when AMD's Ryzen launches? This video is speculative. I'm going to be discussing that very question. It's one that I'm sure many of you have asked as well. I'm going to talk about what we know so far, what we're expecting soon with a fair degree of certainty, and what I think the perfect launch would be for consumers as well as AMD when it comes to their Ryzen CPUs and their pricing. First, let's go over the facts. On the Intel side, they just launched Kaby Lake at the beginning of January,